When we talk about widening the lens, this is a part of education that is so important to adjust your perspective. We find in education there is no one right way to do things. And this is especially true when we're working with our youngest learners. And if you look at this slide, we're moving away from the philosophy of either or, doing things either or, to both and. And I'll give you some examples. A lot of times school districts or teachers or researchers are looking at two different things, developing a reason why one is better than the other. We might say, should we teach our reading with a phonics approach or a word identification approach? Should we have art that is process-based or product-based? Should preschools stress social emotional development or cognitive development? Should learning be teacher-directed or child-initiated? You see how it's like two sides of the coin. It's black or white. It's not both. And when we're dealing with children and we know they have individual differences, we find that either or is not going to work for half of your population. And so we want words like both and. Let's teach reading with phonics and word identification. Let's have preschools that are social and emotionally fulfilling and cognitively fulfilling. Let's have experiences that are teacher-directed and child-directed. And when by blending instead of picking one side, we see that we can better meet the needs of our learners. So some things to consider when you are looking at learning or planning or developing or communicating or assessing, any of those terms, we want to adjust our perspective to include the child. What are their needs on this particular day? What information can we get from their friends or their family or their community that would help us solve a problem? What is the situation that you're dealing with or the context of what's going on? And you'll see that by widening the lens and getting more information, we can make better informed decisions for our learners. And we talked about this a little bit when it came to connecting with the families, how important their perspective or their information is. Again, we want to look at each child as a puzzle, and everyone has some pieces that they can contribute to that puzzle. An example of this would be my daughter when she was in preschool. All of a sudden one day, she decided that she didn't want to do art. And she had always loved art. So her preschool teacher for that day just kind of said, okay, you don't have to do the art project today. And then the next day it happened again. And the next day it happened again. And on their end, they didn't reach out to me quite yet. On their end, though, they were just puzzled by the fact that a child who loved art all of a sudden doesn't want to do art. Well, by the end of the week, there were about 5 days, they came to me and they said, something's going on. Fiona doesn't want to do art, and we don't know why. Did something happen at home with art? And did she? I don't know. They were just baffled. And honestly, when they came to me, I was kind of baffled too. So what we did was we looked at the situation or the context, and we looked all around it. So we stepped back from the art, and we looked at what is involved in the art project. And together as a team, the teachers and I started looking at, well, she has to paint, or she has to glue, or she has to get her materials out. And is there anything that would be something she wouldn't like in the process? And we came to the end of an art project, you wash your hands because they're sticky or they have paint on them or whatever, you're messy. And I said, well, you know what? She hates when her sleeves get wet. And when she washes her hands on her own, sometimes her sleeves get wet because she can't push them up real well. She was little. She was about 3 years old. And so we then included her in our conversation and started to say, why don't you want to do art? well, I like art, but I get messy when I do art. And we said, well, why don't you want to get messy? And she said, well, because then you have to wash your hands and my sleeves get wet. And that conversation, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, we basically figured out why she didn't want to do art. This consequently came up during the transition from fall to winter, where sleeves went from short sleeve to long sleeve. Art, up until that point, when she washed her hands with short sleeves, didn't matter. And then she had about a week where her sleeves kept getting wet, and she didn't like that, but she didn't want to tell the teacher she didn't like that. And our solution was to have the teacher push her sleeves up before she washes her hands. And guess what? She went back to doing art every day and loving it. So we have to see that we have to widen our lens and look outside of just the specific problem or learning situation, and see if we can find more solutions to try. Now, when it comes to that either or, we would say to the child, you can do art or you don't have to do art. But we can solve problems better and give lots of options. You can do art that's not messy and you don't have to wash your hands. Or you can do art that is messy and I will help you wash your hands. You see how that giving a child more options allows them to start thinking independently and making their own decisions, which is important. But it also allows us to find success for children in all different contexts. So we want to widen that lens and not be so hyper-focused on one little component of our program.